Hey Chava, what's happening? Welcome back to Babylon Talmud. Today we're studying Daf Nun Gimel of Masechta Ayruvin, Daf 53. We're starting a new perek, Ketzad Ma'abrin. I think it looks like it might be a complicated perek, but the good news is that the next 2 days are very not complicated. They're actually very awesome. So, it was actually not so easy to I shouldn't say so easy, but I didn't really write much of an outline just because a lot of just interesting agatas, so it's hard to there's no sugyas, but a lot of really cool stuff. So I'm just gonna jump right in. We're gonna start with the new perek on Daf Nun Beis Amud Beis at the Mishnah at the bottom. Ketzad Ma'abrin es ha'arim. So how do you extend a city? Okay, and actually at the very beginning of the Gemara we're gonna have a machloka. If is it Ma'abrin with an ayin, like from ibur, from pregnant, to kind of make bigger. How do you make bigger the city? Or maybe it's like aver, like a limb, like hands that kind of stick out, limbs that stick out of the body. Now, one important thing to note, which is interesting, is that both when it comes to zoning a city as well as determining the tchum, we're always talking in squares/rectangles, kind of like we saw the machlokas in the last perek between Reb Chanina ben Antigonus and the Chachamim about is the tchum circular or is it square, and the Chachamim said it's square. So a city, in terms of measuring the area of the city, is always going to be either a circle, either a square or a rectangle. Those are the shapes that we're talking about. So therefore, if we can extend the city limits, that means that we're literally we're expanding the square to include this thing. So let's say, for example, we've talked in the past about borgenen and little huts and things you can use to extend the city. By extending the city, you mamish expand the square to encompass that thing that is extending it, even if it's just like one little house kind of off in the distance. Well, that's going to, as long as it's within 70 2/3 amos, it's going to expand the square that encompasses the city, or the rectangle, in order to include that thing that extends it. So here are some examples of ways of extending the city. So bais nichnas, bais yotze. So for example, if the wall of the city was constructed by the houses themselves kind of were a solid block of houses, but you have some houses sticking out, some houses coming in. So, recessed maybe is a more elegant word. Pigum nichnas, pigum yotze. Or, for example, you have, guard towers, those kind of round kind of towers or whatever that are in the wall. So if they stick out or maybe recessed. Hayusham gdudios gvos asar tvachim. Or if there were ruins outside of the city that were 10 tvachim tall, those could work to expand the square or the rectangle of the city. Technically, a square is a rectangle, right? At least that's what I was taught once upon a time. Or at least I think that's what I was taught once upon a time. Okay, bridges and tombs that have upon them a dira, a residence, I guess. Somehow that would extend the city. Mutziyan Samida Kenegdan, so that extends the measurement of the city to those points. Osan Kimin Tavla Mubas Kadeshie Niskar Es Azavios, and this is now talking about the tchum, and the tchum as well. We make a square tablet, again either square or rectangle, Kadeshie Niskar Es Azavios, so that you will be able to benefit from the corners, right? So by extending this shape, we can get all this extra space by the corners when including this extra extension. Okay, fine. Now says the Gemara. Now we get just into some awesome Gemara. So you guys ready? Rav Shmuel, Charamer Ma'abrin. Fine. So Rav and Shmuel, machlokas between Rav and Shmuel. One of them says it's Ma'abrin with an ayin, like the Girsa in our Mishnah, which, okay. V'chad Tani Ma'abrin, one of them teaches Ma'abrin with an aleph, okay. Mandatani Ma'abrin Aver. So Mandamu says Ma'abrin with an aleph, it means limb by limb. So Keilu, you have these things that stick out of the city, like a limb that sticks out from the body, and then we extend the rectangle to include that limb, so to speak. Mandamu says with an ayin is like a pregnant woman that her tummy expands. So here also the city expands to include that protrusion. Ma'aras HaMachpelah. When it comes to Ma'aras Machpelah in Hebron, so what is so doubled about this cave? Rav Shmuel, so Machlokes between Rav and Shmuel, Chad Amar Shnei Batim Ze Lefnim Mizeh. One of them says, well, it was two houses, one deeper than the other. So you would walk into one house, and then you would walk from that house into another house. As you can see, there's a diagram in Rashi about it. Okay. The other one says that it was actually a house, and then it was doubled, i.e. there was a second floor above the first one. So now the Gemara says, well, I actually understand the version where it's a house that has another house on top of it. That is what it means machpelah. That's what it means that it's doubled. It's one floor, and then you double that onto a second floor. But according to Mandam, who says that it's two homes, one was, deeper than, one was further in than the other one, what is the doubleness of it? Now, I assume that the doubleness of it would be the fact that there's two of these homes, but apparently that wouldn't be considered kaful, double. Okay, fine. Well, if that's the case, then what makes it double? Shekfula bezugis, well, it's got all these pairs, right? As we're going to see in a second. Adam and Chava, Avraham and Sarah. So let's see. Mamre Kiryas Arba. So it says that Yaakov Avinu went to visit his father Yitzchak by Mamre Kiryas Arba. What is this city of four? So Amr Yitzchak, says Rabbi Yitzchak, Kiryas Arba Zugis. It's the city of the four pairs. Who are the four pairs? Adam v'Chava, Avraham v'Sarah, Yitzchak v'Rivka, Yaakov v'Leah. Very, very cool. Says the Gemara, Vayibimei Amrafel. This was in Parshas Lech Lecha, when there were the fight of the battle between the 4 kings and the 5 kings. So it talks about Amrafel. Who was Amrafel? So Rav Shmuel, Machlokas Rav and Shmuel, Chad Amar Nimrod Shmuel. So one Mandamar is that Amrafel's real name was Nimrod. V'lamanika Shmuel Amrafel. So why do they call him Amrafel? She Amar v'hipil Avram Avinu b'soch kivshan ha'esh. Because of the famous story where Nimrod, right, Avram, I think it's a medrash somewhere, Avram destroyed the idols of Terach, his father. They brought him to Nimrod. Nimrod threw him into a furnace. So Nimrod is so he's called Amrafel because the Aleph Mem Resh, I guess, is like Avram, and then Pal is like Hipil, also like Kivshan Eish. V'chad Amar Amrafel Shmo. The other man is that his real name is Lamaise Amrafel. V'lama Shnika Shmo Nimrod. So why do they call him Nimrod? Shehimrid is kol olam kulo alav b'malchusa, because in his rule he had the whole world rebel against the Eibishter. So from like Mored to rebel. Vayakol melech chodesh ha-Mitzrayim. Now fast forwarding to Mitzrayim, to Egypt. So there was the whole story with the Jews. They went to Egypt, Yosef, famine, all that stuff. And then it says at the beginning of Sefer Shmos that there was a new king in Egypt, Asher lo yada es Yosef, who doesn't know of this guy Yosef, and that's when all the enslavement started, etc. So it says, Vayakum melech chodesh ha-Mitzrayim, a new king came to town in Egypt, came to rule in Egypt. Rav Shmuel, it's machlokus Rav and Shmuel, Chadam or chodesh mamish. So one man the Amr is that it was mamish, a new king. Old king is out, new king is in. The other man the Amr is that it's the same king, just he had new policy. Mando Amar Chodosh Mamish Tichsiv Chodosh. So Mando Amar says that it's Mamish, a new king. The old king died. This is now a new king. So because it says Vayakom El Chodosh. After all, it does say that it was a new king. Mando Amar Shnischachuk Zerosav. Mando Amar says no, it's the same king but with new policies. Well, because it doesn't say anywhere in the Torah that the original king died and now a new one came to rule in his stead, right? Often I feel like, where do we see stuff like that? So-and-so died and ruled instead. Maybe like in Sefer Malachim. Do we see it in the Torah? I don't know. Let's say yes. So, from the fact that it doesn't say that the first one died and then there was a new king, so therefore it means that it was the same king, but new policies. Now, according to Mandamar, who says that it's the same king but with new policies, but it says he didn't know Yosef. Now, if it was the same king, even though he might have new policies, the fact of the matter is, he would still know who Yosef is. So Maya Shalur es Yosef Davidami Commandu lo yada le Yosef klal. No, he made it as though he had never heard of Yosef. Same king, new policies. And according to these new policies, it wasn't very favorable for him to recognize the fact that he had a relationship once upon a time with a Jew named Yosef. So therefore, he just made himself kilu. He doesn't know who this guy is. Alright. Rabbi Yochanan says, Rabbi Yochanan, Yurches Yomim Godalti Eitzel Rabbi Oshaya B'Rivi. This is amazing. So Rabbi Yochanan from Eretz Yisrael, the Amor Rabbi Yochanan, he says that for 18 days I was by Rabbi Oshaya B'Rivi. Now B'Rivi just means that he was a great rabbi. So he said that for 18 days he was by Rabbi Oshaya. Now, I wonder, I didn't see it anywhere. I was talking about it with a friend of mine on Shabbos, and I didn't see it anywhere, but I wonder if Yudches Yamim over here, it doesn't mean 18 days, it means 18 years. Just like Lavan says, Teshiv Anayri Tanu Yamim or Asor, right? That Lavan said that Rivka should stay with us for maybe a year or 10 months. The reason why I think so is because then that would mean that Rabbi Yochanan was a student of Rabbi Oshaya, and he learned by Rabbi Oshaya for 18 years. What's the significance of 18 days? And if he learned by Rabbi Oshaya for only 18 days, well then, who was his other teachers? Who was Rabbi Yochanan's teachers? I don't know. Al-Kopanim, it does say 18 days, and everyone seems to assume it's 18 days. That just seems like such a small amount of time. Anyways, Rabbi Yochanan says, Rabbi Yochanan, Yudches Yom Godalti Eitz Rabbi Oshaya B'Rivi. There were 18 days that I spent by Rabbi Oshaya B'Rivi. Also, Godalti means like I was raised. That sounds like you spend a lot more than just 18 days, but okay, fine. And I only learned by him one thing in the Mishnah. Wow, 18 days and only one thing in the Mishnah. Ketzad me'ivarav me'abrin es ha'arim ba'alef. And the one thing that Rabbi Yochanan learned by Rabbi Oshaya B'Rivi was that our perek, ketzad me'abrin, it's with an aleph like limbs, not with an ayin like pregnancy. Ini, one second, could this really be true? That Rabbi Yochanan spent 18 days by Rabbi Oshaya B'Rivi and all he learned was the fact that me'abrin is with an aleph? V'am Rabbi Yochanan, but Rabbi Yochanan said, Yud Beis Talmidim Ha'ilod Rabbi Oshaya B'Rivi. Rabbi Oshaya B'Rivi had 12 students. V'yudches Yom Godalti B'nein, and I spent 18 days with them. V'lamadti Leiv Kol Echad Ve'echad, and I learned the heart of each one of these 12 students. V'chachmas Kol Echad Ve'echad, and the wisdom of each one of these 12 students. So therefore the question is, how could it be that Rabbi Yochanan learned the hearts and wisdom of all of these students, and yet he claims that he only learned basically that the word ma'abrin is with an aleph. Sounds like he learned a lot more than that. So the Gemara answers, well, leiv kol echad ve'echad v'chachmas kol echad ve'echad gamar. No, actually he learned the hearts and the wisdom of every single person, the depths of every single person. However, Gemara lo gamar, the technicalities of Mishnayos, of learning, of Aleph and Ayin, that is not what he learned over there by Rabbi Oshaya B'Rivi. Or I'll give you a different answer. Minayu didhu gamar, minei didei lo gamar. Or you could say, yeah, when he was by Rabbi Oshaya B'Rivi, he spent most of his time with these 12 students who he really got to know very well, to understand their hearts and their wisdom. However, and he learned plenty from them. But from Rabbi Oshaya B'Rivi himself, he only learned that me'abrin is with an aleph. Or if you want to say, or you could say, yeah, what Rabbi Yochanan is saying is that he learned one thing b'mishnasenu about Mishnayos, but there was plenty of other things that he learned. As Rashi says, what does he say? He learned lots of brises and gemaras, and who knows what else he was learning over there. There must have been some amazing stuff. It says Rabbi Yochanan that when we would study Torah by Rabbi Oshaya B'Rivi, again, it sounds like, this was an extended kind of thing, that when we would study by Rabbi Oshaya B'Rivi, as if he was like a student of Rabbi Oshaya B'Rivi, that's maybe the 18 days were specific 18 days, but I don't know, it's hard to say. I don't know. I kind of want to say it's 18 years, but I seem to be the only one who's saying that. Alright, if you guys hear of anything, let us know. Anyways, when we would study Torah by Rabbi Shai Bribi, in one amma, now an amma is 6 tvachim, we would sit 4 people in 6 tvachim. Basically, each person only gets a tefach and a half of space. That was definitely pre-corona, but al kopanim, it's pretty tight over there. It reminds me of when I went to, and I have some cousins in Kiryat Belz. Their Belzer Hasidim in Yerushalayim. And I haven't been there in years and years and years. This must have been a long time ago. I can't even remember, maybe 15 years ago. But I went with the cousins, they took me to the Tish, and man, you would stand up there on the bleachers so squeezed in like sardines, and you would be, you'd squeeze in at the end, and you would think, holy cow, this thing is packed. Half an hour later, you're mamish in the middle of the bleachers. They basically doubled the amount of people, and you thought you couldn't move when you got there. It's unbelievable. Pretty tight, Darton. Amar Rebbe, and it says Rebbe, Chaver, you ready for this? It's unbelievable. Sheinu lomdin Torah etzer Blazer ben Shamua, haynu yoshvin shisha b'ama. Says Rebbe that when we would study Torah by Blazer ben Shamua, we would sit 6 people per amma. That means each person had only 1 tefach's worth of space. But that's not the part that excites me. The part that excites me is that Rebbe is saying that he was studying by Blazer ben Shamua. Amazing. We've seen together already in Masechta Shabbos on Daf Kuf Mem Zayin Amud Beis that Rebbe studied with Reb Shimon. We saw in Masechta Ayruvin on Daf Yud Gimel Amud Beis that Rebbe studied with Reb Meir, and we're seeing over here on Daf Yud Gimel Amud Aleph that he studied with Rebbe Elazar ben Shamua. All of these students of Rabbi Akiva. Rebbe was like learning from all of these students of Rabbi Akiva. It's really, really cool. Now, he was also the son of Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel, so Mr. learned from his father as well. But maybe that's why he got so smart. We saw in the Gemara in Brachos also that if a person sees Rebbe in a dream, he should be mitzapeh l'chachma, for wisdom. Rebbe was very smart. Vam Rabbi Yochanan, says Rabbi Yochanan, Rabbi Oshaya Bribi, B'dor, Reb Meir B'dor. Now, you ready for this? Isn't that amazing? Says Rabbi Yochanan that Rabbi Oshaya in his generation was like Reb Meir in Reb Meir's generation. My Reb Meir B'doro, just like Reb Meir, we said in Daf Yud Gimel, Lo yachlu chaver v'lamar asov daito. His friends could not, stand at the end of his knowledge. They couldn't sort of, get to the depth or extensiveness of his knowledge. Also, Rabbi Oshaya was the same way. His friends were unable to sort of get to the extent of his knowledge, or the greatness of his knowledge. And says Rabbi Yochanan, that the hearts of the earlier generations was like the entrance to the ulam in the Beis Hamikdash. Now we learned at the beginning of the Masechta that you would first walk through the ulam, and then from the ulam you would get to the heichal in the Beis Hamikdash. And the heichal, we said that there was one idea that Rabbi Yochanan, that the Chachamim, the Tanakama, was basing the dimensions of the Mavui of the Pesach from the heichal, which was 10 amas wide and 20 amas tall. So what Rabbi Yochanan is saying is that the hearts of the earlier generations was like the entrance of the ulam, which was 20 amas wide, and of later generations is like the entrance of the heichal, which is 10 amas wide, which is half that. And we are basically like the hole of a sewing needle, i.e. minuscule. Rishonim, who are the earlier generations? Rabbi Akiva. Achronim, who are the later generations? Rabbi Elazar ben Shamua. Very interesting. Ika da Amri, that those who say Rishonim, Rabbi Elazar ben Shamua, that the earlier generations is Rabbi Elazar ben Shamua, Achronim, Rabbi Oshaya Bribi, and the later generations is Rabbi Oshaya Bribi. V'anu kamlo nekev sid machat sidkis, we are like the hole of a sewing needle. Amr Abaye, says Abaye, and we, Abaye was like 4 generations after Rabbi Yochanan, ki sichta beguda ligmara, we are like a peg that you kind of cram into a wall that is there really tight and squeezed in and forced in, that also our learning is kind of forced, and we can't really learn so good. That's what Abaye is saying. Imagine us. Amar Rava says, Rava says, we're basically like, imagine taking your finger and try to stick it into hard wax. It's not really gonna stick very well, you know. So for Svara also, we kind of like, we're trying, but we're not really getting there. Amar Rav Ashi Anan ki etzbaita bibira l'shichacha. Says Rav Ashi that we are like a finger in a pit. Imagine taking a big pit, sticking your finger in, i.e. there's going to be plenty of room to come in, plenty of room to come out. In one ear, out the other ear. Right? So Rav Ashi says we forget things very easily, just like it's very easy to stick your finger into the opening of a pit. Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Rav, says we read in the name of Rav Bnei Yehuda, shekpidu al lishonim. So Bnei Yehuda, that they were very makpid on what they said. They made sure that whenever they would say something, it was very clear and very easily understandable. Niskayim Torahim biyadam. So their Torah that they would learn, it endured. Bnei Galil, however, the people in the Galil, shelo ikpidu al lishonim, that they would, as we're going to see on Gimel Beis, they were very unclear in the way that they spoke. It was very difficult to understand them. So lo niskayim Torahim biyadam. So that carried over also to their learning. The Torah would learn things, but not really understand it well. They would forget it. They weren't clear in general in anything that they did. Now the Gemara says, "Midi b'kveda ta'yimilsa." So the Gemara says, "Wait, but what does being clear in your speech have to do with remembering and being successful in studying Torah?" So Ella b'nei Yehuda the daike lishna. Rather, the people of Yehuda, the daike lishna, that they were very medayik, that whatever they would learn from their teachers, they would say it over in the same way, to use the same words and the same phrases. So, umisnache lu simano, and they would make like signs and ways to make sure that they remember it properly. Niskayim Torahs and biyadon, so then their Torah, they remembered their Torahs, it would endure. Bnei Galil, however, the people in the Galilee, that they weren't necessarily super careful to say over things in the same way that they heard it from their teachers, and they wouldn't necessarily make signs to remember them properly. Then their Torah didn't necessarily endure. They would forget things. They weren't really the great Torah giants, which is very interesting because who are these Bnei Galil who weren't so learned? Like, we're talking about Reb Shimon ben Yochai, we're talking about Rebbe, we're talking about Reb Yossi, Reb Yehuda, they seem to, I would imagine that we would say that Niskaima Torahs and Biyadin, that their Torah did endure. After all, we're still learning it thousands of years later. Well, probably like 1500. Anyways, so who are these Galilee people? Anybody know? Reb Yisrael, I feel like you would know. Do you know? Bnei Yehuda Gamru Mechad Rabba. I love this. That the people in Yehuda, they would learn from one teacher. I love it. Niskayim Torahs and biyadam, and their Torah endured. Bnei Galil Delo Gamru Mechad Rabba Lo Niskayim Torahs and biyadam. But in the Galil, they wouldn't learn from one teacher. They'd run to this teacher, run to that teacher, want to do this, want to do that. They had a bunch of things, but the people in Yehuda were just focused on one teacher. One learning. It was very clear what they were focusing on. So then, Niskayim Torahs and biyadon, the Torah worked. I love that concept of just very clarity of purpose, of focusing on one thing and doing that one thing very well. So anyways, I love that. And the people in Yehuda also loved that. And it worked out for them vis-a-vis Torah. Ravina Amar, said the very holy Ravina, Bnei Yehuda Degalu Masechta Niskayim Torahs and biyadam. The Chevra in Yehuda, that they would share what they learned, that they would teach what they learned, that they would reveal what they learned. So then their Torah persevered. Bnei Galil Delo Galu Masechta Lo Niskayim Torahs and biyadam. The Chevra in the Galil, that they weren't really teachers, they were more consumers, but they didn't share, they didn't spread what they taught, so the Torah was not Miskayim. David Gali Masechta, Shaul Lo Gali Masechta. David taught his learning, right? We have all sorts of stuff from David. We have Tilim, we have, I don't know, what else do we have? Stuff. I don't know, what else do we have from David other than Tilim? Probably lots of stuff I'm probably just forgetting. David the Gali Masechta. So Ksiv, right, where Shaul didn't reveal too much. I mean, we don't really have too much from Shaul, I guess. David the Gali Masechta. So David, who revealed learning, Ksiv, it says about him, Yireecha Yiruni v'Yismachu, that those who fear you will see me and be happy. Shaul the Lo Gali Masechta. Shaul, who didn't teach, Ksiv El Kol Asher Yifnei Yashia, that whatever he would turn to, he would do bad. Meaning, if like people, it says Rashi, Lo Hayazoch L'Horos Kalacha, he wouldn't be able to give the proper halachic opinions when he was asked. Says Rabbi Yochanan, how do you know that God forgave Shaul for that sin of killing out the people of the city of priests of Nov? Shnamar, as the pasuk says, that tomorrow you and your sons will be with me. That means with me in my sort of area up in heaven. Amr bi Abba, says Rabbi Abba, Yehuda. If somebody asks a question to the people of Yehuda, Didaike Lishna, that they are very midayek in they're very specific about their lashon, about their speech and about their teaching. Me'abrin tnan or me'avrin tnan, you can ask them, is it me'avrin with an aleph or me'avrin with an ayin? Achuzu tnan or achuzu tnan, is it this word achuzu with an aleph or with an ayin? Yadei, they would know. She'elinu, so they asked the people of Yehuda, so what is it? Is it me'abrin with an aleph or an ayin? Is it achuzu with an aleph or an ayin? V'amrei lei, and they said, very good diplomatic answer, Ika detani ma'abrin, v'ika detani ma'abrin, Ika detani achozu, v'ika detanu achozu. Very, very helpful. So they said, well, there are those who say it with an aleph, there are those who say it with an ayin. Thanks, Bnei Yehuda. Bnei Yehuda dedaike lelishna mai hi. What does it mean that the people in Yehuda were very exact with their speech? Dahu bar Yehuda de amalu. Well, there was a certain person from Yehuda who said to other people, Talis yesh li limkor, I have a garment that I would like to sell. Amrullah, they said to him, my gavun talischa. They said, oh wow, okay, I can use a talis. What color is the talis? Amrullah, and listen to what he answered, kitradin ale adama. So it is like beets on the ground. Now, not purple of beets, but apparently a reference to the green leaves of the beets. But he didn't just say it's green. He said it's the shade of green that are like the leaves of a beet. Very specific, as opposed to, what does it mean that the Chevra in the Galil were not very particular when it comes to their speech? Dahu bar Galila, there was a person from the Galilee, Dava Ka'azul, the Amar Lahu, that he would walk around, he would say to them, Leman Amar Leman, Amar Leman, who's got an Amar? And they had no clue what the heck he was talking about. Amar, they said, Glila Shaita, foolish Mr. Galilee person. Chamar Lemerkov, do you mean like a chamar, like a donkey to ride? Or chemer lemishte, or maybe you mean like beer to drink. Or chamra is what? Wine. Or maybe you mean wine, or some kind of intoxicant to drink. Amar lemilbash, or maybe you meant amar, which is like wool. Maybe so you're saying that you're looking for wool to wear. Or amar lis kasa, or maybe you're looking for an amar, an imra with an aleph, which is a sheep to slaughter. So Mr. Galil guy, you got to be clear because we have no clue what you're talking about. There was a certain woman who wanted to say to her friend, come over and I have some fat that I can feed you. Sounds very delicious. Amrla, but she didn't say that very clearly. Instead, what it sounded like she said is, shluchli tochlich lavi. It sounds like what she said is you should be eaten by a lion. Alright? There was a certain woman who came before a judge. Amrle, she said to him, Mari Kiri, and this is not going to make any sense, which is the point, that she completely just She intended to say one thing, but she completely jarbled everything. So Mari Kiri, my master, my slave. Tafla Havis Li, there was a beam, I had a beam, Vigan Vuchmin, and they stole it from you. Vichadu Havyas, and it was, the Chishajulach Ilave, that when they put you on the beam, Lamati Karich Ha'ara, your legs didn't touch the ground. Okay? Yeah, it's weird. It makes no sense. But basically, what she wanted to say was she wanted to come to court and basically say that somebody stole from her. But she came to court and she was just saying stuff that made no sense because she wasn't being clear on what she was saying. Alright, now we're going to get into different cases of people who talk in kind of like code words. So, Amhasa de Rebbe, the maidservant in the house of Rebbe, when she would kind of talk in codes, Amra Hachi, she would say like this. So whenever she wanted the students to leave, it was time for them to go, she would say, Alas nakfas bechad, the ladle is already hitting the bottom of the wine barrel, i.e., there's no more wine, chevra. Yidun nishrai likineun, the eagles should fly back to their nests, i.e., chevra, we're done over here, go home. Bechad havabai delezvun, and when she wanted to indicate that, no, stay, things are good, all good, Hava Amralu, she would say to them, Yaidi basar chaver tamina, let's pop open the plug of another barrel, Vitiskifi alas bichad kiilfa da'azla biyama, and let the ladle float in the new barrel that's full of wine like a boat floats on the river, on the sea. Very nice. Rabbi Yossi bar Asyan, Rabbi Yossi the son of Asyan, ki hava mishtoi bilashon chachma, when he would talk in codes, Omar, we would say, Asuli shor mishpat betor miskin. Okay? Make me a shor mishpat, an ox of judgment on a nebuchdik, what was it? On a nebuchdik mountain. What does that mean? So shor mishpat is like tor, which is like trodden, which is beats. Mishpat is din, like dain. Make me this beat, betor miskin. Tor is a har, is a mountain. Miskin is like dal, like low. So har, dal, char, dal, mustard. Make me a beat with mustard. Guys got that? Good. And when he wanted to know if a certain like inn was a good place to stay, so Amar Hachi would say like this, Gvar pum dain chai mazo tova yesh. Okay? So like ushpizan is like ush pi zan. Like ush is like ish, which is gvar. Pum is like pi, mouth. Dain is like this, I guess. Like ushpi zin, so the zin is like dain. Like, so this guy, ma zo tovayesh, like, is he a good guy? Like, is it worth the money to stay at this location? Rabbi Abo, kav mishtoi bilashon chachmon, Rabbi Abo would speak in codes. Have Amar Hachi, he would say like this, asrigu lifchamim, arikiu lizahavin, so, spread out the coals like in esrig. Oh, okay, Sukkot is coming up. Right, so you would say, no, not spread out. Make the coals glow like an esrig. Like an esrig is beautiful. Make it glow like an esrig. Arkil is oven, and then spread out these gold glowing coals. Ve'asuli shnei magide ba'alata, and prepare for me two roosters that make noise at night. Those who say v'yasuli bahen, and then make on these coals shnei magidi ba'alata, two of these birds. All right, very nice. Amrulei rabbanon l'Rabbi Abo, the rabbi said to Rabbi Abo, hatzpinenu heichan Rabbi Ila tzafun. So the rabbis said to Rabbi Abo, hey Rabbi Abo, can you tell us where Rabbi Eli is hanging out? Omar loyen. So Rabbi Abo said to them, Olad's benaira aronis. He got excited with a young Kohanite woman, Achronis, another one, he remarried. Iranis, who was very awake, Vinirasu, and kept him up all night. So where's Rabbi Eli? He's kept up all night with his new wife. Amrila, they said, Isha, so one way of understanding is, he Pashik got remarried, right? He says, Isha Achronis, he got a new wife, his first wife passed away, he remarried, and that's where he was with his wife. Amrila Masechta, oh, for those who say Lamaisa, that it's he was learning a new tractate, and a Kohen tractate is like Kodshim, right? Rabbi Yitzchak Kohn, Ramir Kamor Shah. So there was all the way at the very edge of the camp, there was a kollel. I also spent 2 summers there at the kollel when I was a little bit older. When I was a little younger, I was in the other part of the camp. And once a year, they would take us to the kollel, and we would have a shmooze with Rabbi Yitzchak Cohn. And I remember he would say, Noshim, I love Noshim. I mamish love Noshim. I love Noshim, Nezikin, Moed, Tyrus, Kodshim. Anyways. So, I guess Rabbi Eli also loved Noshim. Although technically, I guess we're saying it's Kodshim. Alright. Amrile, Rabbi Eli. So they said to Rabbi Eli, Hatzminenu, Heichan Rabbi Abou Tzafun. So he said to Rabbi Eli, tell us, where is Rabbi Abou? Amarloen, and he said to him, Nesayis b'machtir v'hingiv l'mepiboshes. He asked permission from the Nasi, and then went down, right? It says that the machtir is the Nasi because the Nasi has the power to give smicha to people. Now, I don't think that this is referring to like actual smicha, when you like lean on somebody and transfer smicha that went all the way down from Moshe Rabbeinu, because the Gemara in Sanhedrin talks about that, I believe it was a failed attempt of Rabbi Yehuda ben Bava to give smicha to Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Shimon, like all the students of Rabbi Akiva, and the Romans caught them, and they murdered Rabbi Yehuda ben Bava. So I assume that during the time of Rabbi Abou, there was no longer actual smicha, but they would have the ability to make people like a mumche, to make them to call them a rabbi, like we have nowadays. And then there are certain implications of being a mumche in Masechta Sanhedrin. Okay, so Amalai Nesayis b'machtir v'hingiv l'mepiboshes, and then he went down to the south where there were these like Torah scholars. Okay, like Mepiboshes that we learned in Masechta Brachos, that he was a big Talmid Chacham. Amr Rabbi Yeshua ben Chananya, says Rabbi Yeshua. Rabbi Yeshua ben Chananya is Rabbi Yeshua, the great Rabbi Yeshua, a student of Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai. Miyamar nitzchani adam chutz meisha tinok v'tinokes. In my entire days, nobody has ever outwitted me. Nobody has ever outsmarted me and defeated me in a debate. However, there were 3 times I was put in my place, and that was, one time was from a woman, the other time was from a child, like a male child, a young man, and the other one was from a young woman. Isha Maihi, what's the case, what's the story where he was put in his place by a woman? One time I was a guest by a certain place. Also Sali, Pulin, and the what's the word? I don't know. Whatever. The woman who owned the place. So then so she made for me beans. Alright, very nice. My niece likes beans. So on the first day, I ate all the beans and I didn't leave any leftovers. Wow. Good. He must have been a good boy growing up. Ate all of his food. I have a friend that she says that her grandmother would always say that her father was a good boy because he ate all of his food. And he didn't, and day 2, he ate all of his beans, didn't leave anything over. But on day 3, oy vavoy, she burnt them with too much salt. Alright. And Rabbi Yoshua recalls that he took 1 bite and he didn't want to have another one. Amrli, she said to me, Rebbe, mipnei ein chasoid. She said, why aren't you eating? So Amarti, look, kvar sa'ati mibod yom. He says, I'm full, I already ate beforehand. Amrli, she said to me, well, if that's the case, then you also would have refrained from eating the bread. You are not telling the truth. Uh-oh. Amrli, then she continued to say to me, and she pointed a finger and said, maybe the reason why you're not eating is because you didn't leave over any food on the first 2 plates. And after all, didn't the rabbis say that we don't leave over any donations, let's say, from the pot of a Mashayrin Peh Bikaira, but we do leave over these donations these tips in the plate. Meaning, so very interesting. Rashi explains that, well, it sounds kind of weird, but like we leave tips at restaurants, like you go and, you leave, like a tip for the waiter. So I guess this isn't a new concept. Basically what they would do then is you would eat your food and you would leave over some for the waiter, and he would eat that. Which seems super weird. Like, like you just don't eat some of your plate and leave over some of your pasta or something and here, enjoy my leftovers. It's kind of awkward, but I guess that's what they would do, is that they would leave over some and that's what the waiter would eat. And Rabbi Yoshua didn't do that. And she was calling him out and she was saying, oh, maybe the reason why you're not eating the beans is because maybe you're making up for the fact that you didn't leave a tip the last 2 times. So Rabbi Yoshua said that he was put in his place. Alright. Tinokas, what was the time that he was put in his place by a young woman? One time I was traveling, and there was a path that was passing through a field. And I was walking on this path. Amra li tinokas achas, and then a young girl said to me, Rebbe Losada Hizo, isn't this a private field? What are you doing trespassing? Amartila, I said to her, Lo, this isn't a private field. Look, this is clearly a well-trodden path. I'm not the first person to walk here. It must be a public, path. Amra li, she said to me, Listim kamoscha kavshua. She said, yeah, thieves like you have made it into a well-trodden, seemingly public path, but the fact of the matter is it's a private area and you're trespassing, Buster. Okay. Tinok, what is the time that Rabbi Yoshua was put in his place by a young boy? Mahi, what's that? Pamacha sa'isi ma'alich baderech. One time I was traveling, v'ra'isi tinok yoshev al parshas drachim, and I saw a young boy who was by the, fork in the road. V'amarti lo, and I said, be'ez derech neilech la'ir. What is the best way to get to the city, the nearby city? Amrli, he said, Zoktzar v'arucha v'zarucha v'ktzar. He says, well, you have two choices. Either you could take the short long one, or you could take the long short one. Okay. V'alachni v'ktzar v'arucha. So I took the short long one. Okay. Once I arrived at the city, Matzaisi shemakifin osa ganu sufardesen. Once he got to the city, he realized that the city was surrounded over there by gardens and orchards, and he pashit couldn't get into the city. He was forced to turn around. So I turned around and I found that young boy. I said to him, Bini, halo amarti li ktsara? Didn't you tell me that this was the short path? Amarli, velo amarti lach arucha? And he said to me, didn't I say that it was the long path? After all, he said it was the short long path. So nashakti v'arosho, I kissed him on his head. Ve'amarti lo, and I said to him, Ashreichem Yisrael, fortunate are you, Israel, shekulchem chachamim gedolim atem migdolchem v'aktanchem, that you are great chachamim, great wise people, from your big ones to your little ones. You're all great people, Yidden. Chevre, that was Daf Nun Gimel of Masechet Ayruvin. Wasn't that beautiful daf? So at the beginning of the daf we had those we started the new perek, but then we had all those cool things, those machlokas Rav and Shmuel's and agadata. Some are pretty famous, right? With the Melech Chadash al Mitzrayim, the Maris Machpelah. So that was kind of cool stuff. We learned amazing stuff about Rabbi Elazar ben Shamua and Rabbi Oshaya and Rabbi Yochanan and Rebbe, and then talked about the Yehuda and the Galil and the differences in terms of clarity and their learning. Then we got into these code words, these code phrases for a little bit, and then Rabbi Yeshua ben Chananya told us about the 3 times that he was outwitted. Chevra, I hope you enjoyed Daf Nun Gimel of Masechet Ayruvin. I look forward to seeing you for Daf Nun Daled of Masechet Ayruvin. Peace out.